On Monday morning, the villagers found the dead body of Mercy. Her eyes were wide open in fear, her mouth frozen in a silent scream. People gathered around her lifeless body, whispering and crying. No one knew what had killed her. On Tuesday, Patience lay down lifeless in her room. Her face was pale, her hands cold. The village was filled with fear. 2 young women dead in 2 days. Something evil was happening in Agada. Subscribe to this YouTube channel for more videos. On Wednesday, Sonia was found dead behind her house. Her body was stiff, her skin cold as ice. The villagers began to panic. Who was killing their daughters? On Thursday, the whole village shook with fear when Princess Deborah was found dead in the palace. The king's own daughter was gone. Her body was discovered on her bed, her face twisted in terror. The king of Agada became very worried. 4 young women were dead in 4 days. It was too much. He called his chiefs and elders. We must find out what is killing our young women, the king said. This evil must stop. But no one suspected JoJo. JoJo was the most handsome man in Agada. His skin was smooth and dark like the night sky. His teeth were white and perfect. His eyes sparkled when he smiled. Every woman wanted JoJo. Mothers prayed their daughters would marry him. Even the queen once said, JoJo is too fine. But JoJo had a terrible secret. His manhood was not normal, it was a snake. A black, cold, evil snake. And any woman who slept with JoJo would die. The village women didn't know this secret. They only saw JoJo's beauty. They only wanted his love. But they didn't know they were walking into death. 4 women had already died because of JoJo. And soon, there would be more. The village of Agada was no longer peaceful. Fear filled every corner. Women locked their doors early. Men stayed close to their families. But even with all this fear, the women still couldn't stop talking about JoJo. JoJo is so handsome, one woman whispered. If only I could be his wife, another said. Even with the deaths happening one after the other, no one thought JoJo had anything to do with it. He walked through the village with his perfect smile, greeting everyone kindly. He looked innocent, but he was a monster. That night, the village held a meeting in the palace. The king's face was heavy with sorrow. His eyes were red from crying over his daughter, Princess Deborah. The chiefs and elders sat in a circle, their voices low and fearful. We must find out who is doing this, the king said. We cannot lose any more of our daughters. Maybe it's a witch, one chief said. Maybe it's a curse, another added. The king shook his head. We must bring a powerful priest. This evil must be stopped. While the village made plans, JoJo sat alone in his house. He stared at his hands, his heart heavy with guilt. He didn't want to hurt anyone, but the snake inside him was too strong. It was hungry, and it wanted more. Suddenly, there was a soft knock on his door. JoJo's heart jumped. He knew who it was even before he opened the door. It was Anita, one of the most beautiful girls in Agada. She smiled shyly at him, her eyes full of admiration. JoJo, she whispered. I want to be with you. JoJo stepped back, his heart pounding. You can't, he said quickly. You must leave now. But Anita didn't listen. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. Don't you want me? She asked softly. JoJo felt the snake stir inside him. He wanted to push her away, but the evil inside was stronger. He closed his eyes, knowing what would happen, knowing it was already too late. That night, the village would cry again. The next morning, the village of Agada woke up to more terrible news. Anita was dead. Her lifeless body was found behind her house, her face frozen in fear like the others. The villagers screamed and cried. The king called another urgent meeting. "This must stop," the king shouted. "We have lost too many of our daughters. We must find this evil." The village priest was called. He was an old man with powerful wisdom and deep knowledge of the spirits. He sat quietly, listening to the people. Then he spoke. "This is not the work of witches," the priest said. "This is not a curse from the gods. This is the work of a man who carries death inside him." The village gasped. Everyone looked around, fear in their eyes. "We must find this man," the priest continued. "Bring me something that belonged to the dead girls, and I will reveal the truth." The villagers quickly brought the clothes of the 5 dead girls. The priest held them in his hands and began to chant. The air grew cold. The wind began to blow. Suddenly, the clothes rose into the air and flew straight to JoJo's house. The village was silent. All eyes turned to JoJo. "No, no, it's not me," JoJo cried, stepping back. But the priest pointed at him. "The evil is inside you," the priest said. "Confess." Tears filled JoJo's eyes. He fell to his knees. "It's true," he whispered. "My manhood, it's a snake. Any woman who sleeps with me dies." The village erupted in cries of shock and anger. Mothers wailed for their daughters. Fathers clenched their fists in rage. The king stood, his face dark with fury. "You killed my daughter," the king said in a cold voice. "You brought death to my kingdom. You must face the punishment." The villagers dragged JoJo to the village square. The priest performed a powerful ritual, and the snake inside JoJo was forced out. It slithered into the open, a black, terrible creature with glowing red eyes. With one strike, the priest killed the snake. But it was too late for the women who had already died. Their families mourned, and the village learned a painful lesson. The lesson: not everything beautiful is good. Sometimes, the most charming people carry the deepest evil. The village of Agada would never forget the danger of blind admiration and desire. Thank you for watching.